AITA for making my wife's family read their own messages after telling me to raise her baby? I'm Philip, 39, and by the time Claire and I had been married long enough that we were splitting holidays, insurance renewals, and the same tired argument about the dishwasher, I thought our biggest problem was distance. I had no idea her space had another man's name attached to it. Our marriage didn't collapse loudly at first. It just thinned out. We weren't the couple shouting through walls or throwing plates into the sink. We were worse, in a quieter way. We could eat dinner 6 feet apart at the same counter and barely speak. We could fold laundry together, saying only what belonged in whose drawer. We could sit through an entire show and laugh at different parts without looking at each other once. Claire started sleeping in the guest room just to breathe. That's how she put it. "I need space, Philip," she said one night, standing in the hallway with a pillow hugged to her chest. Not a divorce. Not a fight. Just space. I asked, "Space from what?" She stared at the floor. "From feeling like I'm alone while you're right there." That hurt because some of it was true. I had gotten quiet. I'd stopped chasing hard conversations because they always seemed to turn into a trial where every question I asked became proof that I didn't understand her. When Claire said I was emotionally unavailable, I didn't always know how to argue. I did shut down sometimes. I did choose silence over another 3-hour loop that ended with both of us exhausted and nothing fixed. But I was guilty of being quiet. I wasn't guilty of making her lie. The small changes came first, the kind you notice and then talk yourself out of noticing. Her phone was always face down on the couch when I walked into the room. If it buzzed, she didn't grab it right away anymore. She'd wait half a second too long, like she was trying to seem casual, then pick it up and turn her body slightly away from me. She changed her passcode and told me it was because everyone should have privacy. I agreed with that. I really did. Privacy is normal. Secrets are different. But at the time, I kept choosing the explanation that hurt less. Some evenings, she'd sit in the driveway with the engine off, the glow of her phone lighting up her face. I would see her through the front window, thumbs moving fast, then stopping when she looked up at the house. When she finally came inside, she smelled like cold air and a perfume she didn't usually wear during the week. "Long day," I asked once. "Don't start," she said, kicking off her shoes. "I'm not starting anything. I asked if you had a long day." You do this thing where you make normal questions feel like accusations. So I stopped asking. That was my mistake, or one of them. I let peace become more important than honesty. I thought if I gave her enough space, she'd eventually come back to me. Instead, she used that space to make room for Caleb. Caleb wasn't some stranger from a bar or a random name that appeared out of nowhere. He was someone from before us, an old connection who had drifted in and out of her social orbit over the years. I knew of him the way husbands know of certain men, not because anything had happened, but because the name carries a certain tone when your wife says it. The first time she mentioned him again, it was casual. "Caleb messaged me about a mutual friend," she said, rinsing a mug in the sink. I nodded. "Okay." She looked annoyed that I hadn't reacted more. "It's nothing." I didn't say it was. "You got quiet." I was already quiet. She rolled her eyes and walked away. After that, Caleb's name disappeared from her mouth and, apparently, moved into her phone. For months, I told myself we were going through a bad season. Married people say that, don't they? A bad season. It sounds temporary. It sounds natural. It sounds less frightening than saying the person who promised to build a life with you is slowly building an exit in the guest room. Then one Thursday evening, Claire stood in the kitchen holding a white plastic pregnancy test, as if it had burned her hand. I remember the dishwasher running. I remember a dish towel hanging over the oven handle. I remember the smell of rice cooling in a pot because neither of us had eaten yet. And I remember Claire crying before I even understood what she was showing me. "I'm pregnant," she said. For a second, my body reacted before my brain did. My chest seized with shock, then something like hope, then confusion, because her face didn't match the words. She wasn't smiling. She was shaking. "Claire," I said carefully. Okay, we can." "I made mistakes," she blurted out. The dishwasher hummed behind us. I stared at her. "What does that mean?" She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. I was overwhelmed. "I didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me you're pregnant?" "No. Tell you everything." There are moments when your mind understands something before you let yourself say it. Mine did. It lined up the driveway texting, the guest room, the face-down phone, the perfume, the word space, and placed them all in front of me like evidence. I asked the question she was avoiding. Is it mine? Claire closed her eyes. That silence changed the entire room. Please don't make this ugly, she whispered. That wasn't an answer. The baby didn't do anything wrong. I didn't ask what the baby did. I asked if the baby is mine. She gripped the edge of the counter. I don't know. I didn't yell. I think part of me expected myself to. I thought if something like that ever happened, I would explode. Instead, I felt cold, like my feelings had stepped outside and shut the door behind them. Who? I asked. She shook her head. Philip, please. Who? Her voice was barely there. Caleb. The name didn't surprise me. That made it worse. She started talking fast after that, like if she put enough words in the air, she could soften the shape of what she had done. It wasn't planned. It started as messages. She felt lonely. She felt invisible. Our marriage felt dead. Caleb listened. Caleb made her feel seen. She was confused. She was hurt. She didn't know how to come back from it. She said it like loneliness was a receipt she could hand me for what she did. For how long? I asked. She looked toward the window. A few months. How many? I don't know. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that if there's a pregnancy timeline involved. Her face twisted. You're being clinical. I'm being clear because you're being vague. That was the first time she got angry. Not when she admitted the affair. Not when I asked if the baby was mine. She got angry when I refused to get lost in her fog. I'm scared, she snapped. I'm pregnant, and you're interrogating me. I am asking the basic questions you should have answered before you put that test in my hand. I just want us to move forward. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman I had loved for years stood in our kitchen asking me to move forward without telling me where I was even standing. I want a legal paternity test, I said. She recoiled like I had slapped her. What? I'm not signing anything until we know the truth. No hospital forms, no insurance decisions that list me as the father, no acknowledgement paperwork, nothing. You're making this about punishment. No, I'm refusing to sign my name to a question mark. She cried harder and said I was cold. She said I was turning my back on an innocent baby. She said biology wasn't everything. She said if I loved her, I would understand that families are more than DNA. I remember thinking that she had skipped right over the part where she betrayed me and landed on the part where I was supposed to prove my character. I need air, I said. She stepped in front of me. Please don't leave. I'm not leaving the house. I'm leaving this conversation before one of us says something we can't take back. I went into the living room and sat there in the dark while she called her mother. Claire didn't put Janet on speaker, but she didn't need to. Janet's voice was sharp enough to cut through walls when she wanted it to. I heard pieces. Pregnant. Philip. Test. Caleb. Then Claire's sobbing got louder, and Janet's tone became the calm, polished kind she used when she wanted control. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Janet. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. On the fourth call, she left a message. Philip, this is not the time for pride. A baby needs stability. Claire needs support. There is a time to be hurt and a time to be an adult. Don't punish an innocent child because your feelings are bruised. Call me back when you're ready to talk like family. I played it twice, not because I wanted to hear it, but because I wanted to understand what had just happened. Janet hadn't asked me what happened. She hadn't asked if I was okay. She hadn't asked what Claire had admitted. She had already decided what I owed. By the next morning, the family group chat had turned into a courtroom where I was the only defendant. Aunt Diane wrote, "This is not the time to make Claire suffer." Ryan, one of Claire's cousins, wrote, "You're really going to demand a test while she's pregnant?" Another cousin added, "You have a chance to be the bigger person." Then Janet said, "A good husband protects his family." A few minutes later, Diane wrote almost the same thing with different punctuation. "A real husband protects his home, Philip." That was when something clicked. They weren't confused. They weren't asking questions. Their messages sounded rehearsed, like they had all been handed the same script with 3 phrases circled: stability, family, pride. I typed 3 different responses and deleted all of them. The first was angry. The second was cruel. The third was too long and still not enough. Instead, I called my younger sister, Ashley. She picked up on the second ring. "You never call this early unless something is on fire." "It might be," I said. I told her everything. Claire's pregnancy. Caleb. The uncertainty. Janet's voicemail. The group chat. Ashley went silent for about 5 seconds, which for her was a full speech. Then she said, "Do not yell. Do not threaten. Save everything. I'm not planning to threaten anyone. I know. I'm saying it because they're going to want you to be emotional. Don't give them messy. Give them documented. I feel like I'm going insane. You're not. They are building a story around you. Build a record." That sentence did more for me than any comfort could have. Ashley told me to save the voicemail, screenshot the group chat, email copies to myself, and write down a timeline while it was still fresh. She told me not to sign anything. She told me to call an attorney before another family conversation. "You can be hurt later," she said. "Right now, be careful." So I became careful. I saved Janet's voicemail. I took screenshots of Claire's texts where she admitted the affair. I didn't dig through her phone. I didn't follow her. I didn't call Caleb. I didn't post anything online. I made a folder in my private email with the date in the title, and I started placing everything there. That night, Claire barely spoke to me. She stayed in the guest room with the door cracked open, crying loudly enough that I could hear, but not so loudly that I could accuse her of performing. I slept on the couch, not because she forced me to, but because the idea of being in our room felt ridiculous. The next morning, I found the shared laptop open on the kitchen counter. Claire used it sometimes for recipes and appointments. We both did. It wasn't hidden, not password locked at that moment, not something I had to break into. The screen was awake because she had left in a hurry after another tense half-conversation about a doctor's appointment. An email thread was open. The subject line read, "Please don't tell him yet." I stood there with my coffee going cold in my hand. I know there are people who will say I should have closed it immediately. Maybe in a perfect world, with a perfect marriage and perfect trust, I would have. But at that point, my wife had already admitted to cheating for months. Her family was pressuring me to sign up for fatherhood without proof, and the words on that screen were already visible from where I stood. I read enough to understand that the betrayal was bigger than Claire and Caleb. Claire had written to Janet 2 weeks before she told me about the pregnancy. I don't know what to do. The dates might line up with Philip, but they might line up with Caleb too. Caleb says we should wait before telling anyone anything permanent. Janet had replied, "You need to keep Philip calm. He is the stable one. Caleb is not ready for this." Claire wrote, "If Philip signs the paperwork, it will be easier." Janet's response, "Then Philip needs to step up. He already loves you. He'll come around." I read that line 3 times. He already loves you. Not he deserves the truth. Not tell your husband before this goes further. Not this is wrong. He already loves you, like my love wasn't something to honor, but something to use. Further down, Claire had forwarded screenshots from Caleb. "Caleb, we don't even know for sure. Caleb, I care, but I can't blow up my life overnight. Caleb, maybe Philip doesn't need every detail yet. Caleb, let's wait before making anything permanent." There he was, brave enough to sneak around with another man's wife, careful enough to avoid any sentence that sounded like responsibility. I took pictures of the visible thread with my phone. I emailed the screenshots to myself. I didn't search for more. I didn't open other folders. I didn't need to. I had the shape of it now. This wasn't panic. This was a plan. Claire and Janet already knew the baby might not be mine before they turned the family on me. Caleb already knew there was a chance he was the father before he suggested keeping me in place. And I was supposed to be guilted into signing whatever forms made everyone else's life easier. I called an attorney that afternoon. The first person who didn't tell me to be emotional was the person I paid to explain consequences. I brought the screenshots, Janet's voicemail, the group chat, bank information, and my rough timeline. I expected the meeting to feel humiliating. Instead, it felt like someone had finally turned on a light in a room where everyone else had been whispering. The attorney was calm. She told me not to sign any acknowledgement of paternity. She told me to keep communication in writing whenever possible. She told me not to drain joint accounts, not to threaten anyone, and not to make dramatic public statements. She explained that acting angry might feel good for 10 minutes and cost me later. "Facts help you," she said. "Revenge fantasies do not." That line stayed with me. So I didn't empty our joint account. I didn't cancel everything overnight. I moved my paycheck into an individual account going forward. I kept paying our agreed-upon household obligations. I stopped automatic transfers that were optional or vague. When Claire asked about pregnancy expenses, I replied in writing that I would discuss appropriate obligations after legal paternity was established and through counsel if necessary. She hated that. "You're treating me like a case," she said from the kitchen table, one hand resting on her stomach like a shield. "I'm treating this like something that has legal consequences. I'm your wife. You were my wife when you were emailing your mother about getting me to sign paperwork." Her face went pale. For 1 second, I saw real fear, not sadness, not a performance, not frustration. "Fear? What are you talking about?" she asked. I looked at her. "Please don't tell him yet." She opened her mouth, then closed it. That was all the answer I needed. After that, Claire's tone changed. She stopped saying I was cruel and started saying we should talk privately. She said she had been scared. She said Janet had only been trying to help. She said nobody was trying to trap me. If nobody was trying to trap me, I said, then why was everyone so angry that I wanted the truth before signing anything? She cried again. "You don't understand what this feels like." "No," I said. "I understand exactly what it feels like to be expected to carry consequences for choices I didn't make." 2 days later, Janet invited me to dinner. Her text was almost elegant in its manipulation. "Philip, we need to sit down as a family and heal. No lawyers, no anger, just adults talking about what is best for this child and for family unity." I showed Ashley the message. She called me immediately. "Absolutely not," she said. "I think I'm going." "Philip, I know what it is. It's an ambush." "Yes. And you want to walk into it." "I want them to stop saying things behind my back. If they're going to make me the villain in a room full of people, I want that room to have the facts." Ashley exhaled hard. "Then bring copies. Don't hand them your originals. Don't argue in circles. Say what you need to say and leave." "I know." "And Philip?" "Yeah. They are going to call your calmness cruelty. Let them. Calm is the only thing they can't use against you." I printed everything the next morning. Not dramatically, not with red circles and angry captions. I made a simple timeline with dates, messages, and short notes. Claire tells Philip about pregnancy. Claire admits affair with Caleb. Philip requests paternity test. Janet voicemail. Group chat messages. Email thread showing prior knowledge. Caleb messages avoiding responsibility. Attorney consultation. Request for written communication. I printed copies of the key screenshots. I included a transcript of Janet's voicemail. I included the group chat messages from the relatives Janet had pulled into it. Then I placed the folder in my car and went to dinner. It wasn't a dinner. It was a jury Janet had fed first. There were paper plates stacked near the counter, a casserole cooling in the middle of the table, and a salad no one had touched. The room smelled like baked cheese and tension. People were pretending the gathering was casual, but everyone looked at me the moment I walked in. Claire sat near Janet, her eyes swollen, hands folded over her stomach. Janet stood at the head of the table like she was hosting a meeting. Robert sat beside her, quiet, cleaning his glasses with a napkin even though they already looked clean. Aunt Diane was there. Ryan was there. 2 other relatives stood near the kitchen island with drinks they weren't drinking. "Philip," Janet said warmly, too warmly. "Thank you for coming." I nodded and set the folder on the chair beside me. Claire glanced at it, then looked away. Janet asked everyone to sit. She said we were family. She said emotions were high. She said a child was coming and children deserved peace. She used the word stability 3 times before anyone took a bite. Then she turned to me. "I think we need to address the fact that you have scared Claire at a time when she should feel protected." I leaned back. "Protected from what?" Janet's lips tightened. "From being abandoned." Claire started crying softly, either on cue or from real emotion. Maybe both. I had stopped trying to separate the two. "I don't want to fight," Claire said. "I just want us to move forward." Ryan shook his head at me from across the table. "A real husband doesn't walk away when things get hard." There it was. I looked at him, then at Janet. Things didn't get hard. Things got hidden. No one spoke for a moment. Janet recovered first. "Philip, clever lines are not going to help this family. Neither will pretending I'm the problem." Aunt Diane sighed. "No one is saying Claire handled everything perfectly. That's generous." "She's pregnant," Diane snapped. "You're demanding a test like she's some criminal." "I'm demanding legal clarity before I accept legal responsibility." Janet lifted a hand like she was calming the room, but her eyes were hard. "Biology isn't the only thing that makes a father." "No," I said, "but fraud isn't what makes one either." Robert looked up then. Janet's voice sharpened. Careful. I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the woman who had helped turn half the family against me was now warning me to be careful at her dinner table. Claire wiped her cheeks. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just admit you're hurt and stop punishing me? I did admit I was hurt, I said. In private. You didn't want private. You wanted an audience. Then I opened the folder. I took out the first stack and placed it in the center of the table. Janet went still. I picked up my phone and sent the timeline by email to the adult relatives in the room, the ones who had texted me, judged me, or repeated Janet's version. I had already typed the message before I arrived. It said only, since I have been accused by multiple family members of abandoning Claire and refusing basic decency, I am sharing the timeline and communications relevant to those accusations. Please do not contact me further with claims that contradict what is documented here. Phones began buzzing around the table. Ryan looked down first. Diane followed. One cousin muttered, "What is this?" "Context," I said. Janet reached for the folder. "This is inappropriate." I placed my hand on it before she could pull it away. "You made it a family issue when you invited everyone here to judge me. This should have stayed private," Janet said. I looked at her. I asked for honesty in private. Claire gave me tears. You gave me a voicemail. Ryan gave me a public post. Ryan's head snapped up. I didn't use your name. You used enough. And you used the phrase abandoning a pregnant woman after being told one version of the story. He looked back at his phone. Diane was scrolling now, her face changing as she read. "Janet," she said slowly. "What is this email?" Janet didn't answer. Robert put his glasses back on and reached for the printed copy nearest him. He read with his mouth pressed into a flat line. I watched him move from confusion to embarrassment to something close to anger, though quiet anger was all Robert seemed to allow himself. Claire whispered, "Philip, stop." I shook my head. "No. You've had months of hidden conversations. I get 10 minutes of clear ones." I pointed to the timeline. Claire told Janet she didn't know whether I or Caleb was the father before she told me she was pregnant. Janet told her to keep me calm. Claire said if I signed the paperwork, it would be easier. Janet said I already loved her and I'd come around. Janet's face flushed. I was trying to protect this family. From the truth or from consequences? Robert asked. Everyone looked at him. He was holding one of the pages. His hand wasn't shaking, exactly, but the paper moved a little. "Janet," he said, quieter now. "Did you know this before he did?" Janet inhaled. I knew Claire was scared. That is not what I asked. She needed support. "Did you know the baby might be Caleb's before Philip knew?" Janet's silence was her first honest answer of the night. Robert set the paper down and folded his napkin slowly, carefully, like he needed something to do with his hands. "My God," he said. Claire started sobbing harder. "Dad, please." Robert looked at her then, and for the first time since I had known him, he didn't soften immediately. "Were we asking him to forgive?" he asked. "Or were we asking him to cover for it?" No one answered. Janet tried to take control again. "This is exactly what I wanted to avoid. Public humiliation. Stress. A pregnant woman being attacked at dinner." I closed the folder halfway and looked at her. Claire isn't being attacked. She's being challenged by people who finally have the facts. "How could you do this to me in front of everyone?" Claire cried. I turned to her. "I asked you for the truth in private. You brought an audience." Her face crumpled, like that line hurt more than the folder. Maybe it did. The truth hits differently when it's organized. Ryan stood up and walked into the hallway with his phone. I heard him whispering, then typing. Later I found out he was deleting the post where he had written about men who walk away from pregnant wives when biology hurts their ego. He hadn't named me, but enough of the family had known exactly who he meant. Aunt Diane pushed her chair back. "Diane," Janet said. Diane held up a hand. "Don't. You're going to believe printed screenshots over your own sister? I'm going to believe that you knew more than you told us." Diane grabbed her purse. "And I'm not staying in a group chat where I'm expected to repeat your version and then look stupid when the truth comes out." She left without taking a plate. Not everyone switched sides. Real life isn't that clean. One cousin muttered that I still could have handled it privately. Another said pregnancy was complicated and I was making everything worse. Janet kept saying the same things in different ways. Family unity, stability, what people would think. But the room had changed. Before the folder, They were looking at me like a man failing a moral test. After the folder, they were looking at Janet and Claire like people realizing they had been handed the answer key to the wrong exam. I stood up. "This is what happens next," I said. "I am not signing any pregnancy-related paperwork or acknowledgement of paternity unless legal testing establishes that I am the father. I am not attending any more family meetings designed to shame me into agreement. Communication about finances, medical expenses, or our separation needs to be in writing. If anyone posts or spreads a false story about me abandoning my wife and baby, I will correct it with the same timeline I shared tonight." Claire looked small in her chair. For a second, I hated that I still cared. "I'm not abandoning a family," I said. "I'm refusing to be assigned a lie." Then I picked up my folder and left. Janet called my name twice. I didn't turn around. The next few days were ugly, but not in the explosive way people imagine. It was mostly small, exhausting ugliness. Claire crying behind doors. Janet sending long texts about stress and shame. Robert leaving me one voicemail that simply said, "I'm sorry, Philip. I should have asked more questions." Diane leaving the family group chat, which somehow caused more drama than the affair itself. Ryan texted me privately. I deleted the post. I didn't know all that. I replied, "Next time, know before you accuse." He sent back, "Fair." That was the closest thing to an apology I got from him. Caleb stayed quiet until the legal process reached him. Then suddenly, he had plenty to say, just not anything useful. Claire showed me one message because she was angry and wanted sympathy, forgetting I no longer played the husband role she needed. Caleb had written, "I'm not saying I won't do the test. I just don't understand why Philip is making this so hostile." I almost admired the nerve. The man had slept with my wife, tried to stay hidden, encouraged her to delay, and now thought my request for facts was hostility. Claire stood in the hallway holding her phone, her eyes red. "He's overwhelmed," she said. I put my keys in the bowl by the door. He had months to think about that. "You don't have to be cruel." "I'm not. I'm just not interested in helping you be disappointed in him." She looked down at her stomach. "The baby is innocent." "Yes," I said. "And every adult around this baby keeps using that sentence to avoid talking about what the adults did." After I filed for divorce through my attorney, Claire changed again. Less anger, more panic. She started sending messages late at night. "I know I hurt you. I don't recognize myself. I miss my husband. Can we please talk without lawyers?" I answered the necessary parts and ignored the emotional hooks. Not because I felt nothing, but because I felt too much, and I knew it would be easy to confuse pain with responsibility. Ashley checked on me constantly. "Did you eat?" she asked one night. "Yes." "What?" I looked at the cold slice of toast on a plate beside me. "Food." "Philip, I'm fine." "No, you're functional. Those are two different things." She was right. I was functional. I went through the motions. I slept badly. I kept lists. I answered emails. I met with my attorney. I separated finances carefully. I didn't hide assets or play games. I kept paying what I was supposed to pay and stopped paying for the parts of Claire's life that had become leverage. It's strange how much of heartbreak becomes paperwork when you refuse to burn your life down. The paternity test took time. Not dramatic movie time. Not an envelope slammed on a table time. It moved through the proper channels, with appointments and instructions and waiting. During that wait, Janet tried one more time to pull me into a family conversation. Her text said, "Philip, no matter what the result says, you have been part of this family for years. Do not let one painful chapter erase that." I stared at it for a while before replying. One painful chapter didn't erase this family. The group effort to make me legally responsible for a lie is what changed what family means here. She didn't respond. When the result finally came through, I was alone. Caleb was the father. I stared at the result longer than I needed to, not because I was surprised, but because a piece of me still hated being right. There had been a tiny, irrational part of me that thought maybe the test would come back mine, and then at least the pain would have a shape I understood. Betrayed husband. Biological father. An impossible choice. Instead, it was simpler and uglier. I had been the backup plan. Not the father. Not the partner being told the truth. The stable option. The man who already loved her. The signature they hoped would make things easier. I sent the result to my attorney. I didn't post it. I didn't send it to the entire family. I didn't call Janet and ask if she wanted to discuss stability now. I wanted to, for about 5 minutes. Then I imagined Ashley's voice telling me that facts help, but revenge fantasies do not. So I let the legal process speak. Claire called me that evening. I almost didn't answer, but there were still practical things between us, and I had learned not to leave gaps that people could fill with their own version. Her voice was wrecked. Caleb isn't answering me. I sat down at the kitchen table. The house felt too quiet, even without the old tension in it. Okay, I said. He said he needs time. He said his life is complicated. He said he'll participate in whatever he has to, but he doesn't know what I expect from him right now. I said nothing. Claire sniffed. I didn't think he would disappear once things got serious. That sentence almost did more damage than the confession. Not because it hurt more, but because it showed me how far she still was from getting it. She had gambled our marriage, my name, her family's trust, and a child's future on a man who had been telling her from the beginning that he wasn't willing to stand still long enough to be counted. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, she whispered. For years, that tone would have moved me. I would have softened. I would have made a plan. I would have said we'd figure it out, even when the mess wasn't mine. This time, I stayed still. That's the first consequence you didn't get to hand to me, I said. She started crying again. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold. I'm finished being used as heat for everyone else's fire. I loved you, she said. I believe you loved what I made easier. She inhaled sharply, like she wanted to argue, but no argument came. I have to go, I said. Philip, please. Talk to your attorney. Or your mother. Or Caleb. But don't talk to me like I'm your husband. I ended the call. That was the closest I came to breaking. Not at the dinner. Not when I read the emails. Not when the test came back. It was after that call, sitting alone at the same kitchen table where she had told me she was pregnant, realizing the house was finally quiet in an honest way. The divorce moved forward. Claire stayed with her parents for a while. Robert, from what I heard, stopped letting Janet speak for both of them. Diane never came back to the group chat. Ryan avoided me completely, which was probably best for both of us. Some relatives apologized. Some went silent. A couple stayed loyal to Janet's version because admitting the truth would mean admitting they had helped pressure a man into raising another man's child under false pretenses. I learned that not every consequence looks like a dramatic downfall. Sometimes it looks like people losing the right to sound righteous. Sometimes it looks like a mother who built her authority on appearances suddenly being questioned at her own table. Sometimes it looks like a cousin deleting a post and pretending he never wrote it. And sometimes it looks like a woman realizing the man she chose for excitement wasn't built for responsibility. And sometimes it looks like a husband taking his name off a lie before the ink could dry. I don't hate the baby. I never did. That child didn't ask to be used as a moral weapon by adults who were scared of embarrassment. I hope Caleb becomes better than his messages suggested. I hope Claire becomes honest enough to be a good mother. I even hope Janet learns that protecting your family doesn't mean polishing a lie until someone else can be trapped inside it. But none of that requires me to volunteer my future. For a while, I felt guilty every time someone said the baby was innocent, because of course the baby was innocent. That was never the question. The question was whether innocence could be used as a rope around my neck, while the guilty people held both ends. I refused to let that happen. I didn't shout outside Caleb's place. I didn't humiliate Claire online. I didn't empty accounts or threaten anyone or turn myself into the villain they needed me to be. I saved what mattered. I told the truth when they tried to bury me under their version of it. I signed nothing that made me responsible for what they already knew might not be mine. That's what changed me most. Not the cheating, even though that hurt. Not the pregnancy, even though that complicated everything. It was seeing how quickly people could turn patience into permission and love into leverage. I used to think staying calm meant absorbing the damage. Now I know calm can also be the way you refuse to hand anyone the knife. Claire once asked me, during one of our last in-person conversations, if I could ever forgive her. We were standing near the front door. She had come by with Robert to pick up some of her things, and for a few minutes, Robert stepped outside to take a call, leaving us in the awkward quiet of a half-empty hallway. "Do you think one day you'll understand?" she asked. I looked at the guest room door behind her, the one she had used as a border months before I knew there was someone on the other side of it. "I understand more than you think," I said. Her eyes filled with tears again. "Then why does it feel like you hate me?" "Because I stopped protecting you from the consequences." She nodded, like she wanted that to be cruel. It wasn't. It was just true. Robert came back in, carrying 2 boxes. He paused beside me and said, quietly enough that Claire wouldn't hear, "You handled this better than we deserved." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. After they left, I walked through the house and noticed the ordinary things that had survived the drama. The dishwasher still needed to be unloaded. There was a scuff on the baseboard I had been ignoring for 6 months. A pile of mail sat on the counter. The couch cushion still dipped on the side where I had slept after the pregnancy test. Life didn't suddenly become good. It just became mine again. I locked the door, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my email to send one more document to my attorney. No speech, no performance, no final message to the family. Just another clean line in the record. I didn't walk away from a baby. I walked away from a lie they tried to put my name on. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.